it's called like the sixth sense. So in the same way that we have like sight, hearing, taste, we also can sense what is happening inside. So things like hunger, could be I need to use the bathroom, could be tiredness, emotional state, mood, like everything that's happening for our in our internal landscape. And the more that we can go from that being, let's say, like 32 pixel to like high definition, the more clarity we have, that is basically interoception. And so really, like any skill, it's just practice. You can doing kind of body scans is one way to do it, to kind of ask yourself questions around like, how is my posture? How is my awareness? How is my mood? How is my breath? How, like, what sensations am I noticing? Where might be tension in my body in this moment? All those kinds of things. The more that you practice that, like anything, the more you just naturally develop this capacity.
Before we dive into today's episode, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us grow and inspire more people on their journeys. Thank you.
Hello, Jonny. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Thomas.
So, Jonny, I always start with the same question, which is introduction, but this time I'll try to start with something different. So, can you tell us, how do you feel in this moment in 3 words?
I love that. Right now, I feel cold, spacious, and intrigued.
Mm-hmm. Can we expand on these words? Because I wasn't really expecting cold or spacious. Can you tell us more why?
Yeah, well, cold because it's turning winter here in Colorado, and my hands and feet are just lacking.
I thought that there would be some bigger meaning or something different.
No,
but I get it.
just purely the temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And spacious. Yeah, I had a like a morning meditation and tea sit this morning, and so there's a quality of just spaciousness in my experience.
Yeah, and intrigued. Have you got any plans or goals or something that makes you to feel this way?
Intrigued? No, I usually feel intrigued at the beginning of conversations like this, just to see where it might go. There's just like always an interest and a curiosity, I guess.
Yeah, that is something that I can relate to, so I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
cool.
As you said, you mentioned meditation. Is that something that you practice regularly?
Yeah, it is. I would say I kind of go through phases where it gets more or less intense. Right now, I sit for maybe 20 or 30 minutes in the morning with some tea, and it's more of just a kind of open awareness practice, just kind of tuning into my body, tuning into sensations. But I've done many different types of meditation over the years. This is just more of like I guess it's like a kind of like house cleaning. It's almost like a mental hygiene as well. It's kind of starting the day from a place of relaxation.
Yeah, I tried meditation before as well, but for some reason I've never sticked with that. I don't know if I did it wrong, if I had wrong expectations, or there was something else. So, have you got any advice for someone like me? Maybe what to focus on or what to do differently to stick with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost like saying, like, what type of training do you want to do? Like physical training. There's so many different aspects that you can practice with meditation. Everything from cultivating metta, which is like loving kindness, to cultivating presence, to kind of working with creating psychological distance between you and your thoughts, and almost having that spaciousness. So I think it really depends on what someone's goals are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I really like Sam Harris has a great app called Waking Up that many people have probably heard of. He has a good 30-day series, and then from there you can kind of choose your own journey. I think Waking Up is probably my favorite app that's focused on meditation. And then also things like, a 10-day retreat, something like Vipassana, is also a good way of doing a deep dive. And sometimes I think it helps to do a kind of intensive practice, and then it's easier to keep the practice going after after that intensive period.
Yeah, the Sam Harris's app sounds like a good idea. I haven't really tried it before, so I may give it a try. Then, for the people who don't know you, I know that you always dreaded this question, so I will try to say it instead of you, and you can say if I said it correct or add anything that I missed. So it was your introduction. So Jonny Miller is the host of Curious Humans podcast, and is the creator of Nervous System Mastery. He's an expert in emotional resilience, known for his TED Talk, which is called Gifts of Grief, and his work with high performance and leaders. He's originally from the UK, but currently he lives in Colorado. Is there something, Jonny, that I missed or something that you would point out?
No, that's a pretty good summary.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I don't really like to say introductions either, so I completely understand you. Can we then, Jonny, start with your background, because you are originally from the UK? So can you tell us briefly something about your childhood? If you were a curious child, I guess you were, and what was it like for you to growing up in the UK?
Yeah, let's see. I was very into video games and adventures, I think, were the things that I was interested in. And I think I was very I was like bored at school. I really didn't enjoy school very much. It felt like pointless to me kind of at the time. I just felt very uninspired, and so I think I tried to feed my imagination through reading fantasy. Like The Wizard of Earthsea was one of my favorite books, playing Legend of Zelda, and reading about like National Geographic adventures. It was kind of way I think it was escapism in a form, but in also a healthy way.
Yeah.
And
Was it with the school that you didn't find interesting what they were teaching, or you were a child that it was hard for you to hold attention, or something else?
I think both. I mean, honestly, I think the ways that I have so much to say about the schooling system, but the idea that children should, sit still at a desk for like 9 hours a day and not move and be in their bodies and be outside is ludicrous. I think the way that a lot of the information is taught, again, it's like very kind of passive and just receptive and going through textbooks. So yeah, and I just didn't feel connected or inspired by a lot of the material. It just felt like a series of hoops to jump through in order to pass exams, which was then a vehicle to getting into a good university. And like that didn't really interest me. So
what was then the topic that you are interested in, such as what to pursue later on in your career?
Yeah, so I was interested I studied philosophy at university, and I was really interested in that. I think I found that fascinating, and I think it's because it connected to questions around what does it mean to live a good life. I think that really interested me, and there were questions around ethics and looking at reading Nietzsche and Aristotle and the Greek philosophers. I found that fascinating, and I think that thread, connected and stayed with me after university. And I discovered, initially like reading Alan Watts and people like that, and some Ramdas and more Eastern traditions. And and I think I kind of followed that question into, let's say, experimenting with psychotechnologies. So whether that's breath work, whether that's meditation, whether that's working with psychedelics. And I view that as almost like a way of exploring, in a first-person sense, exploring our inner landscape and exploring what does it mean to live a good life, but not in an abstract way, in a kind of very like felt sense, experiential way. Yeah.
And as you said, you were interested in philosophy. What was the idea of your profession once you finish your education, if you knew what you would like to do?
I only knew that I didn't want to get a job in the city, say a banker or a lawyer or a consultant, which is what 80% of my friends were aiming for.
Like typical 9 to 5.
Typical 9 to 5. I'd spent some time in London. I'd met these people who were maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, and they seemed like, I mean, frankly, kind of like dead inside, just like not excited by their lives. It was so predictable. It was very uninspiring, and I was almost afraid that was what I would end up doing. So I think it was more, I didn't know what I wanted, but I just knew what I didn't want.
Yes, yes. So you continued exploring this area, but what was
Mhm.
actually your profession? What did you do in this, in this sphere?
So I applied to a startup incubator in Chile, in Santiago, called Startup
Oh,
Chile. And along with two friends, they gave us $40,000 to fly to Chile and to start a startup. So I kind of was like dove headfirst into the world of being an entrepreneur and what does it mean to build a business. And that was my work.
how did you from London end up so far away in Chile?
Well, the government said they would give us money to fly there, so we were like, okay, we'll go. Why not? Like there was no downside. They didn't take equity. It was purely to
Oh, okay.
create an entrepreneurial culture in Chile, a really amazing program. And so
Mhm.
they incentivized entrepreneurs to fly there.
And is that how you built the company Maptia for
hmm hmm
storytelling with your friends?
Yeah, so it started out there, and then we eventually then applied to Techstars, which is another incubator program this was in Seattle in the US, and Maptia went through Techstars at the time. Yeah.
Can you briefly tell us more about the company? Did it work in this area that you were interested in, such as something connected to philosophy or the senses that, as you mentioned before?
Yeah, so it was the first tagline we had was the most inspirational map in the world. And the idea was to curate geotagged stories, visual stories, and to create this like inspiring map that I'd been so impacted by travel before university, and I deeply believed that if more people were inspired to see the world, then they would also care about it more, and they'd want to kind of conserve it and protect it and feel connected to it. So we curated stories of adventure, stories of cultural impact, working with like Charity Water and nonprofits like that, and then stories of kind of like culture, so indigenous tribes,
Mhm.
different ways of living, different ways of being in the world, because I believed it was important to share that and to kind of inspire people to learn and care and maybe even see some of these places for themselves.
It sounds like a fulfilling mission. Did you enjoy it working on it?
I very much enjoyed it. I have deep love and respect for my two co-founders. It was challenging to make money. That was kind of what we
Mhm.
ran into, because we were essentially a content platform, and we didn't want to run ads and banner ads and things.
Yeah.
And we were a little bit too early before like crypto payments or things like that would have been a thing. So it was essentially challenging to make money in the long run. And the work itself that I was doing was less fulfilling as well. I loved the mission,
Mhm.
but I was mostly doing like admin things and running the business and emailing photographers, which just was like it was okay, but it wasn't my deep calling.
Yeah, this less exciting side of running a business, doing all the
Yeah,
administrative stuff. Mm.
exactly. Like I don't know if you've seen Walter Mitty, but I felt like Walter Mitty. He's like develops photos in for Life magazine of these like people having exciting adventures.
Mhm. And if I'm not mistaken, the company isn't around anymore. Is that the financials the reason why it stopped?
Yeah, so it unfortunately had to be taken down because the server costs were quite expensive. But I hope one
Mm.
day we could maybe bring it back to life and just pay
Mm.
for it to exist, because I think it's quite a beautiful kind of repository to have online.
Yeah. And then another point that I mentioned in our introduction was the TED Talk, quite a big thing that you did before. There was unfortunate event in your life. For people who don't know you, it was passing of your previous partner. Can you tell us briefly what happened, why that happened, and tell us the story behind it?
hmm Yeah, sure. So this was a few years later after Maptia, and I was engaged at the time to an amazing woman called Sophie. She had bipolar disorder. She'd been diagnosed with, and when I was traveling in Portugal one weekend, she'd taken time off work and she kind of like titrated off the medications, and she went back to work and she had an anxiety attack at work. She was a junior doctor, and she came home and ended up overdosing on her medication and taking her own life. And that was just a kind of like turned my life upside down in a way. I had never been through anything that was like emotionally intense or challenging before, I would say. I think I'd had a pretty easy life. And it very much, kind of brought me through this very intense period of grieving. And there were a lot of beauty and a lot of challenging aspects in that for me. But the TED talk that I gave was my, it was called The Gift of Grief, I think was the title. And it was essentially sharing the beautiful aspects of the grieving process and what that opened up for me.
Do you still remember what was the feedback like?
Of the talk?
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful. I mean, the people who were there live said beautiful things. I think many people felt seen in that as well, and others who were more stuck in their grief, I think, felt hopeful that it didn't have to be like that, forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I've received many messages from people who have, I think, been touched or moved or resonate with some of what I shared.
And how did you find it speaking about this experience publicly or even live to the audience during that talk?
Terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was terrifying and also very meaningful. There's something about, I think this is true of most intense experiences, where if you're able to share the story in a way after you've been through, almost like the hero's journey cycle. I don't know if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell, but
Yes,
this
we
idea
read
of like
it at university.
great, yeah, like returning to the village.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what it felt like. It was like sharing this very intense kind of 2.5 to 3 year period that changed me, and just getting to share what that was like was very scary and vulnerable, but also very meaningful, I would say.
And obviously it's a terrible event that we cannot really imagine. So how did you deal with it after it happened, or what helped you, to go through everything afterwards?
In the immediate aftermath, you mean?
I mean, yeah, when it happened, like let's say days, weeks, or even months.
Yeah. I think, like, first and foremost, in the immediate aftermath, just being around close friends and family and being kind of held in community was essential. In the beginning, there's almost this like, it's like too much to really process, and so there's this kind of shock. It's almost like disbelief in a way. And being around other people, and just giving myself spaciousness to be with the sensations and to feel was essential. I ended up going back to some of the places that were meaningful for both of us. So the places that felt like they were kind of imbued with aspects of grief or aspects of our relationship or connection. That felt very important. And I say the most important thing was giving myself the space and time, and kind of building the confidence up to allow myself to feel the impact of the loss. And it felt like increasing waves of grief, and the more that I was able to be with that and like allow it to flow through me, the more it did, and the less I resisted it, I guess.
Is that also something that you would recommend to people who experience something like that as well in their lives?
Yes, absolutely. I think. I mean,
if there are like any better ways how to, of course I cannot imagine what was it like, but how to deal with such experience.
I mean, I think the best way is to the degree that you can, to give yourself space and like, take time off work if that's available. Surround yourself with caring people and support, and kind of with that support, allow the the intelligence of the grief to kind of run its course. And I think that when, like, the idea of the 5 stages of grief, those are, in my opinion, 5 different ways in which we resist feeling grief itself, whether it's like denial or bargaining or anger. I think it's just the ways in which we resist the intensity of the grief. And so there was a really beautiful talk by Liz Gilbert, who came out some years later, but she had this phrase of like I am willing, and having that as like a background mantra was very helpful for me. Like I am willing to feel, I'm willing to allow this, let this in.
And is this whole experience and what you went through afterwards, is that what led you to start in your nervous system mastery?
Yeah, absolutely. It was. It opened me up to my like emotional landscape that I think I'd been very cut off from, and I'd been very heady, I would say, up until then. So yeah, it opens just really like an exploring meditation and breathwork in particular. I realized how much more there was to explore there, and how I felt like a beginner in that path in a way.
Yeah. So with nervous system mastery, can you introduce it to the listeners? What's the framework? What's the the bootcamp? What are the goals, and who is it for?
Yes, it is a 5-week course. It's for who's it for? It's for anyone who is interested in exploring their own inner landscape in a more detailed way. I mean, a lot of people join because they struggle with anxiety or burnout or some chronic health challenges, or maybe they're parents and they want to share these tools with their kids. But ultimately, it's about learning the levers in our physiology to consciously shift our state, either upshift or downshift, to be more attuned to our internal sensations, and ultimately to welcome the full spectrum of emotions as they move through. Grief being one example.
Yeah. Is there any specific target clients that you work with, or it can be pretty much anyone? Because I know, for example, you worked with people from some big companies and successful entrepreneurs. So is it focused on anyone, or it can be everyone?
Initially, it was people in tech, and but I think that's expanded to a much broader audience. Yeah, I think people in positions of leadership, I think maybe have more motivation to learn these skills because their state directly impacts the people that report to them and the rest of their team or company. But ultimately, I believe that almost everyone can be served with these practices in some capacity.
And can you spot any recurring themes or features of the people who go through this bootcamp?
In what sense?
Such as, for example, was there a specific reasoning, or if they experience something in their life and that's the reason why they join?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, often they go through some kind of challenge or hardship. It can be burnout, can be health challenge, basically where they come up against their nervous system capacity and they realize that they need to upskill in that area. It's often a big reason. Relationship conflicts can be another one. I think that's an area where nervous system capacity is essential. Let's see what other themes. Yeah, we're just opening up a new cohort right now, so there's a lot of people coming through, and I'm reading their introductions and their motivations for joining. Yeah, and a lot of people like wanting to increase their heart rate variability, wanting to feel more resilient to stress, to be able to downshift in the evening after a stressful day at work without relying on alcohol or weed, things like that. Lots of reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like something that pretty much everyone experiences, as you mentioned, for example, stress from work or trying to wind down at the end of the day. So I believe that it will be beneficial almost for everyone.
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, it's just a side note that the website is really beautiful. So for anyone,
thank you.
have a look. It's really well done.
Yeah, it's new. We released that a few weeks ago.
And there is also people can sign up for short email course, if I'm not mistaken. So that is something I would recommend to people as well. So can you say what do people receive if they sign up?
Yeah, so there's two things. They're both on the website, which is nsmastery.com. There is a self-assessment, which allows people to get a sense for the baseline of their nervous system capacity. And then I share, I think there's 5 specific practices that are personalized to your score that you can experiment with in your day-to-day life. And I think that's what I really encourage, is like the spirit of experimentation and wanting people to try these things for themselves and to see if they resonate. And then the email course is 5 to Thrive, which is also on the website. And that's more of an educational series of like learning interoception, learning tools for self-regulation, and learning non-sleep deep rest is a really useful practice that I think is
And SDR, right?
NSDR, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that really helpful. And then a kind of intro to emotional fluidity as well, and how to practice that.
So very helpful tool that is for free to people. So give it a try. It sounds great that you provide a lot of useful resources for free, because another one that I was about to mention is your emotional resilience wiki, where people can find loads of helpful information and even can contribute. So can you tell us more about this resource? What are its goals and what can people find there?
Yeah, I made this a while ago. It was essentially geared towards mostly founders and entrepreneurs and leaders who were experiencing burnout or afraid of burnout. And it's some questions to ask, some tools that can be used, both kind of mindset based and physical, and then some resources and directories for going deeper as well.
Yeah. And as you mentioned the burnout, I would like to stick with this for a bit, because I spoke with some people, whether it's on the podcast or even online, for example, on LinkedIn, because I try to be active there. And a lot of people discuss burnout there as well. So I assume that you've experienced it as well, if I'm not mistaken, or have you not?
Yeah, I did in my time running a startup.
So can you try to point out, let's say, a few points, how to try to prevent it if it happens, how to try to deal with it, and maybe how to spot any signs that it's coming?
Yeah, so burnout, I would say the number one skill is actually interoception, which is being able to track, sense, and feel your kind of internal landscape and listen to the signals that your body is giving you. I think often people don't realize they're burnt out until like much further into or they don't even realize they're stressed until they hit burnout. And so it's like tracking the signs of stress in your body, and listening to them essentially. And many people, it'll take like a health crisis or like some crazy event for them to realize, oh shit, I'm actually really burnt out. And so noticing the kind of the leading signals, maybe it's like feeling exhausted, maybe it's poor sleep, maybe it's health challenges, physical tension. It's like paying attention to that and addressing that early and not waiting for the dump truck of burnout to hit. I think that's like the number one thing, is like preventative. If you realize that you are burnt out, rest is probably the first thing. Just like deep rest and removing as many obligations as you can. And then, yeah, often there's also emotions that get repressed or overridden during the burnout phase. And so there's likely a buildup of emotional debt, I call it, to kind of go through and to feel through. That's often part of the journey.
And with all your knowledge now, do you still see signs that burnout is coming for you, or do you manage to be in such a state that it doesn't really happen or it doesn't come?
It hasn't happened yet. Yeah, I think I'm more sensitive. I would say my system's more sensitive. So if I start to notice myself pushing a bit too hard, then I'll generally kind of take the foot off the gas pedal and step back. And like, this weekend we're going camping. And yeah, I think I'm definitely much more tuned, and I would be surprised if I burnt out, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Are you looking to elevate your online presence? Check out Trailblazed, our digital marketing agency. Whether it's standing out on social media, crafting a stunning new website, or developing impactful visuals, Trailblazed has got your back. Visit trailblazed.digital and reach your online potential today.
And another term that you mentioned before is interoception, which I'm not going to lie, I had to Google before what it means because I feel like I've never heard the term. But can you share maybe some techniques how to enhance awareness of interoception? And also,
Sure.
if you can one more time, maybe say what it means for people who didn't catch it before.
Yeah. So it basically means like it's called like the sixth sense. So in the same way we have like sight, hearing, taste, we also can sense what is happening inside. So things like hunger, could be I need to use a bathroom, could be tiredness, emotional state, mood, like everything that's happening for our in our internal landscape. And the more that we can go from that being, let's say, like 32 pixel to like high definition, the more clarity we have, that is basically interoception. And so really, like any skill, it's just practice. You can doing kind of body scans is one way to do it, to kind of ask yourself questions around like, how is my posture, how is my awareness, how is my mood, how is my breath, how, like, what sensations am I noticing, where might be tension in my body in this moment, all those kinds of things. And the more that you practice that, like anything, the more you just naturally develop this capacity.
Is that something that you practice regularly, or you don't really have to because maybe it's natural for you?
In the beginning, it was intentional. I think it just happens more naturally now. And things like NSDR practice also has an element of that. I find that for me, the practice is more coming back to a state of rest and relaxation. And from that relaxation, I'm just naturally more aware and sensitive to what's going on.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned now, NSDR is, if I'm not mistaken, it's also called Yoga Nidra, isn't it? Because I know the term from Andrew Huberman. I tried it before. So for the people who've never heard this term, can you briefly explain what it is and what are its benefits?
Yes. So Yoga Nidra is a wonderful practice. It's like a guided body scan, essentially. It can take anywhere from 10 minutes up to 45 minutes to an hour. And as you there's different variations, but the ones that I like involve initially progressive muscle relaxation with the breath, which helps to kind of really relax and ground, and then kind of guided body scan, bringing presence and awareness to different body parts. And it creates what's known as a hypnagogic state, which is this space between sleeping and waking. So the body feels like it's asleep, but you're aware, you're not dreaming or anything. Sometimes you fall asleep, but that's fine. And it's very rejuvenating. It's you kind of 15-20 minutes later, you wake up and you feel revitalized, you feel nourished, you feel alert, focused, and it doesn't take very long.
Is that also something that you practice regularly?
I try to, yeah. I ideally 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah.
I tried it before as well, but again, for some reason, I haven't stuck with it. So I hope that this episode will be a good reason not to have any excuses and come back to it.
Great. Yeah. Highly recommend it.
Another topic that you mentioned before was breath work. So outside what we just discussed, whether it's meditation or NSDR, do you do any other breath work techniques, or do you focus on it, in any other different ways?
Yeah. So there's many types of breath work. I really like two practices are kind of my go-tos. One is humming, which is a form of breath work in a way, and the other is something like 4-4-8 breathing or alternate nostril breathing, which it helps with downshifting. And there's also breathwork journeys, which are more like to music. They might take from an hour to an hour and a half long, and those are more. It's a very different category. That's very good for kind of processing unexpressed emotions, I would say. So it kind of depends on what the goals are, but the breath is very powerful. There's lots that can be done with the breath.
Yeah. I would be curious to ask you, what do you do, or what technique or something you use when you feel stressed?
I acknowledge the stress. I think that's the first thing, is like actually maybe even saying it out loud. I would say I like to either go outside in the sunshine, like put my feet in the ground, take some breaths. Some sighs can feel really good. It's like just like really let the tension go, because stress usually comes with tension in the body, and so I try and get into my body, get into my senses, and then allow that tension to just be released. Something as simple as like sometimes I'll go into my bedroom and just literally put my feet up and kind of take some big breaths into my into the back of my chest, and just with each kind of big breath, like hold it and then just like let it go in a big exhale. Sometimes sauna cold plunge rounds can be really, really good as well. Sometimes, connection with my wife or our puppy. Really, the main thing is just like noticing and acknowledging, and from there it's almost like obvious. And everyone has their own preferences.
And this is going to sound probably like a silly question, but do you still experience, of course, you probably experience stress, but a lot, or to what extent? Because I would assume that maybe you have some techniques or ways how to prevent it. So what is it like for you?
Yeah, I would say I probably notice it most when I travel. Like we went to New York recently, and just going through, busy international airports is inherently stress inducing. I try and I mean, I really like noise cancelling headphones for the busy airports to kind of minimize the stimuli, and the wearing like orange tinted glasses for the terrible overhead lighting can be really helpful. But yeah, I think I notice it most when I travel, and there's that kind of disruption to my normal rhythm, a lot of sitting down, a lot of maybe poor air quality. I think travel is like an inherently stressed, and also the time change is stressful on the body as well. So I think just knowing that it takes a toll on the body when you travel, and allowing recovery time afterwards, I think is important.
Yeah, and of course, the overall experience that something may go wrong. Of course, you hope for the best, but you don't want to.
Totally, yeah. We almost
plan.
missed our flight on the way back here, and we were like running through the airport, and we made it with like
why
1
did
minute,
that
1 minute
happen?
to spare. Because we stopped off at a cafe and we spent too long there, and then the traffic was really bad. That was basically it.
I experienced it once as well when I was waiting on a different gate, and I noticed too late, so I can totally relate to that. Don't want to experience it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then next topic that I'm, of course, very excited to discuss is your podcasting experience. Your podcast, which is called Curious Humans, which, by the way, is a great title. I like it as well. So, Jonny, what made you to start a podcast?
I think so. I mean, maybe similar to you, but I was looking for mentorship in my life, and it felt like an excuse to have interesting conversations with people that I respected and learn from them. And that turned out to be true. And I had a lot of questions that I thought there were other people who had answers to. And yeah, that was definitely the main reason. I think that continues to be the reason.
And you started quite a while ago. You spoke with some impressive guests, just to name a few: Derek Sivers, Kevin Kelly, recently Ali Abdal. So some amazing names. Do you have any dream guests or some people that you would like to bring on?
Andrew Huberman would be fun at some point.
I can imagine it will be amazing conversation.
Yeah, he's got a new book coming out, so I'm gonna reach out and see if he's open to that. Someone like Elizabeth Gilbert, I think, would be really interesting. I've really enjoyed her conversations with Good Life Project and Tim Ferriss and people like that. Let's see. There's a guy called Christopher Bash who I'd love to interview on the podcast, who did 72 high-dose LSD journeys.
Oh.
and had just very interesting stories to share from that. I think that would be a fascinating conversation. Yeah, there's a fair few. We'll see.
Mhm.
We have there's time.
Yeah. And I feel like that before, or when I discovered you, there were more episodes, and it feels like then you had a break. And recently, you started releasing again, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, more frequent episodes than before.
Mhm.
So, is there a reason that you had a break? Is that you were working on something else, or you needed a break, or something else?
Yeah, I think I just naturally go through creative cycles. I think there's times when I get inspired and I want to be more outward facing in that way, and then there's other times where I just like to disconnect from technology and
Mm.
not have too much on. Particularly with the cohorts that I teach, there's kind of like two big busy phases. Like I'm in one right now, and then there's another one in the spring, and then in between, I just like to disconnect more and prioritize connecting with people and being offline.
Mhm. It was one of my questions. How do you manage time management? Because
Hmm.
of all the projects that you worked on, the free stuff that you provide, nervous system mastery, podcast, content creation,
Hmm.
how do you manage everything?
I mean, I'm not the best at it. I think I don't really use deadlines that much, so I just kind of work on stuff when I feel inspired to work on it. Um, or if recently I traveled a fair bit over the summer and I had some great conversations and met some new people, and I was like, oh, I'd love to have like a podcast with you. Let's just like schedule a podcast, and that happened pretty frequently. So I ended up having a lot of episodes, and there's I think 4 or 5 more yet to be released that are being edited right now.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I would like to be more discerning about what I say yes to, because I get excited quite easily by projects, and there is
Yeah.
limited time and capacity. Right
Mhm.
now, nervous system mastery is my main project, I would say. I'm also doing an app called State Shift that's sharing NSDR and other practices like that. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think I like to work on what feels most alive or what feels most exciting.
Yeah.
And so far that's been working.
As you just mentioned the app, do you know when is it going to be released?
It is in App Store submission right now. We're waiting for Apple to approve it.
Wow, it's exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I can share a
I
link
know
with
you
you.
said NSDR, but do you want to promote the app a bit more? Tell us,
Yeah,
tease us.
yeah. Great. So it's initially the idea was an easy way for students to access some of the nervous system tools. So things like the breathing, the humming, the NSDR, the upshifting, like breath of fire. And then as we explored it more, I realized that it could be a kind of standalone product, and that
Mm.
these just having kind of very easy access to some of these tools, which vary from like 2 minutes to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on how much time you have. Yeah, I think that they can have such an impact in a very short space of time. They're kind of what's known as bottom up practices as opposed to top down. And there's so many people these days who struggle with anxiety or ADHD as well. It can really help with ADHD symptoms. And so the idea was to share these tools in an accessible way and see what happens. I mean, it's an experiment. I don't know if it will resonate, but I hope it
Mhm.
will. We'll see.
I think based on what you said, there's no doubt that I think people are facing anxiety more than before,
Hmm.
especially in today's digital world. So I think,
Hmm.
although I hope it will be the opposite, but I think that in the future it may be even worse. So I guess that there will be a market for that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And obviously, you've done your research, but also before we discussed some other similar apps, such as the one from Sam Harris.
Hmm.
So, what makes your app different from the existing apps? Or why should people use yours instead of the other ones?
Well, so Sam Harris's app is around meditation, and I think that I like the distinction between top down versus bottom up.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation is top down, it's like working with the mind. Bottom up is working with the body. And I don't think there are many tools out there right now which focus on the bottom up approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the main thesis. There's also an AI component where we've trained a kind of a voice model on my voice and my wife's voice, so you can personalize some of the recordings based on your name and your intention and other aspects as well.
Oh, it sounds pretty cool. Very excited. And of course, need to ask these questions because excited about podcasting. But since you've got experience, years of experience, many episodes released, big people you spoke with. So for the people who want to start their podcast, have you got any advice how to start, what to focus on? Maybe what would you do differently if you are starting again?
I think the most important thing is that you're just excited to have the conversations. I think it's very challenging to grow podcasts and also to make money from podcasts. So if you're doing it to make money, I would consider something else, frankly.
I can agree.
Yeah.
Do it because you enjoy it, not to get rich.
I would really focus on the intrinsic motivation. And, if you end up doing 100, 200 episodes, then for sure you can start to kind of get sponsorship and work with brands and things like that. But my main advice would be keep it simple in the beginning, make it fun, make it enjoyable for the guests, and commit to like 10 episodes in the beginning. Just like try 10 episodes, have fun with it, see what happens, and then reflect on, do you enjoy it? If you enjoy it, keep doing more. If not, don't. I think it's that simple.
And have you got any specific plans with the podcast? Of course, to get your dream guests, but is there maybe something different?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I think, I've started to view the podcast as also a means of spreading the word about nervous system mastery in the course I teach. So I think focusing more around nervous system adjacent practices and guests will be part of it. I think it's something of a passion project for me. We've had maybe, I think it's like 120,000 downloads, something like that. So not like fairly significant, but at the same time, compared to the big podcast, it's like nothing. So I just probably keep doing more of the same, I think, for now.
And another great thing that I would like to point out is that you started creating some amazing content for YouTube, which, if I'm not mistaken, you haven't done before. And I'm mentioning it not only to promote the value it provides, such as anything about nervous system mastery and other info you provide, but also amazing production quality, which I really enjoyed. So what made you to suddenly, start producing these videos? Or why haven't you started earlier?
Good question. So I think that I was excited by the idea of creating something that was very high quality and something that would be somewhat timeless. A lot of the content I write, especially on Twitter, feels like it's gone in 2 days later. And so I like the idea of putting in a lot of effort up front to create a series of videos which would be increasingly valuable over time. I think YouTube, if done well, can be a kind of appreciating asset for people. And I kind of had this idea of comparing nervous system mastery to being like a video game. And that metaphor was really fun for me to play with. And so...
sorry to interrupt. I was about to mention it felt like a GTA, Grand Theft Auto. You got a character and all the elements are out. And I think it was beautiful and really well made.
Like Grand Theft Auto, but more regulated and with less murdering people. I met this guy Mark, who was a fantastic YouTube general manager. So he really took care of a lot of the post-production, the animation, the sound design, some of the script writing, and it was really fun. And I think I'll keep doing it. It was definitely, it's a lot of work. It's surprisingly kind of heavy lifts to do high production quality YouTube videos in that way. There's just so many separate skills that you have to learn and focus on. But I really enjoyed it. I'm really proud of the videos that kind of came out of that. And I like the idea of sharing these concepts in a way that is also fun and engaging, because I haven't seen any other YouTube channels that talk about nervous system work in a way that is also kind of high production quality. So that's kind of the idea with the channel.
I agree. That's why it stood out for me as well, because it may not be as exciting topic maybe for some people, but I can definitely say with this video, it looks beautiful. As you said, it looks like a game, so it makes it just fun to watch. It's a good quality. You learn something new. So my next question was actually if you plan to continue. So I'm happy that you said that you've got some plans with that and that you will probably continue.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's definitely expensive as well. You know, it takes
yeah.
budget and time and resources, but I think it's worth it. I kind of want to invest in probably another 5 and see what happens.
And what was the feedback like from?
Great. People
Yeah.
loved it. Yeah. I think it was seen by like 100,000 people on Twitter, and
Oh, nice. Yeah.
yeah, feedback was great.
And as we'll be finishing soon, I know that I asked you about your goals or aspirations with the podcast, with YouTube. But when it comes to nervous system mastery, have you also got any specific goals or milestones or, any future plans?
Yeah, I mean, I have some, I think, increasingly big visions for it. We've had 1,000 students go through now, so it's kind of getting to a good size. But I'm curious about how to kind of take this work into organizations, working with leaders, working with teams. I think that's interesting. I'm excited for the app as well. I think that could be a kind of both a good source of, for sure, interest in the course as well as just a business in and of itself. And yeah, I'm also exploring. There's a research project which is maybe too much detail to go into now, but I'm excited to kind of help to spearhead some research and potentially a kind of medical scanning device that would be very related to the nervous system work as well.
Oh, it sounds great. I'm glad to hear that you continue exploring, building. It probably says something that you're still a curious person.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I think I want to keep following that curiosity and not. If I was doing the same thing over and over again, it would become boring.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we, of course, discussed everything that you work on. And what are your hobbies? What is it that helps you to switch off, that you like to do in your free time, if you've got any free time left?
Yeah, I love climbing here in Boulder has been wonderful, like rock climbing outdoors. And but I've been a surfer all of my life, and we're actually moving back to California, or moving to California in a few weeks' time. So I'm really excited to be back in the ocean, and just surfing and foil boarding is what I plan to spend a lot of my time doing. Yeah.
And can you name, I assume maybe that you are also interested in personal development. Do you read any books that you would recommend? And if not from personal development, any other books that you would recommend?
I mean, that's a big category. I
Maybe
love
just something that comes quickly to your mind.
Yeah, I think David White, The Three Marriages, is a fantastic book that I've read many times. Also his book Constellations. Basically anything by David White I'd recommend. The Extended Mind I've just seen by Annie Murphy Poole is more based on neuroscience, but I think I find that very interesting as well. What else comes to mind? Oh, The Great Work of Your Life by Stephen Cope, I think is a good book. And related to that, The Pathless Path would probably be a recommendation for people who are looking to find like more meaningful work and maybe break out from the kind of 9-to-5 treadmill.
It's from Paul Miller, if I'm not
Paul
mistaken.
Miller, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I feel like I haven't read the previous one, but I remember this one. And I can recommend it as well. Those were great tips.
Yeah, and he has a new book called Good Work, which is about reclaiming ambition.
Oh, wow, nice. Excited for that one. And also, what about podcast inspirations? What podcasts do you listen to?
Oh gosh, I listen to quite a few. I love Modern Wisdom with Chris is great. I like.
By the way, podcasts where Jonny was as well.
Yeah. We had a conversation recently. It was really fun for me. I love Huberman Labs. I still listen to. You know, this usual Lex Friedman. And there's a podcast called The Emerald that's a bit I'd say it's a bit like out there, maybe quite far on like the woo spectrum, but I think it's very well done. It's more like an art project. It's a great podcast. Good Life Project with Jonathan Fields is fantastic. Yeah, those are probably the main ones.
Yeah. I think then we can slowly, Jonny, wrap it up. But we discussed everything. But where can people find you? Where can people follow you? And even to sum up all the work that you've done, everything that you work with.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Thomas. Nervous System Mastery, or nsmastery.com, is the main website that has the self-assessment, has the cohort-based course, and the free email course if people want to check that out. And then on the podcast is Curious Humans, which is on Spotify, etc., all the podcast apps. And then I'm pretty active on Twitter, if people are, or X, I guess it's called these days. And Jonny, JONNYM1LLER is my handle. Feel free to say hi there. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
You've also got a lovely website, simple jonnymer.co, that links
thanks.
to
I made
everything.
that a long time ago. I hope it's up. I might have to update it after this, but yeah, we'll see.
But I like the design that you've got across your socials, across your design, not design, but any links that I find. So that is something that I would point out as well.
Thank you.
And then maybe to finish up, is there any final message, something that I should have asked you and didn't ask you, or something that you would like to share before we wrap it up?
No, I just say for listeners, I'd say like design an experiment for yourself. Like if anything resonated in this conversation, try and frame it as an experiment, something you can try, test out for yourself, then reflect and just keep experimenting through life. I think it's one of the fastest ways to grow and learn, and also one of the most fun ways. So that would be my parting words.
I like it. I can only agree with you, Jonny. I want to say a big thank you. As someone who's been following you, listening to your podcast, watching YouTube, it was a great pleasure to welcome you and have a chat with you. Wish you all the best. I will share all the links, everything that we discussed. We'll continue following, supporting, and excited to download your app. So thank you, Jonny.
Appreciate that, Thomas. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Produced by with Tomer. Check out show notes for all the links, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your feedback. Speak soon.